welcome back to Vinyl Show and Tell. I hope everyone's doing alright as usual. Thanks as always for tuning in. So today I would like to talk about probably my favourite record label. It's called Harvest Records. I've talked about it before on my channel when I've been showing off various purchases or showing off, recommending albums from the kind of, the classic prog era. But I thought I'd dedicate a whole video to it and show off my top picks, some of my favourites. So just to give a little bit of background, it was set up by EMI in the late 60s as a progressive subsidiary. This was not uncommon. We of course had Vertigo Records, which gets a lot of coverage in the vinyl community and is talked about an awful lot. Obviously we had things like Island, Edgar did the same with their Duran label, and so on and so forth. But I really feel Harvest doesn't get the exposure that it really deserves. It's such a brilliant label, and the kind of back catalogue really, dare I say, it does rival Vertigo. It's not quite as desirable as those Swirl Vertigo releases. Some of them, look, they are desirable, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't get the kind of accolade. So I thought I would show off the top picks and go from there. My interest in this label started off from when I started listening to Pink Floyd and Deep Purple back in the 90s. One of my Pink Floyd albums came with this inner sleeve. It was an early pressing, and this advertises the first year or so of Harvest pressings, and it intrigued me, absolutely intrigued me. I was just, I was looking at them, and even these little black and white images, they just looked like the sort of things I wanted to collect. So after doing a bit of research on them, I was actually given a back issue of Record Collector from a record shop I used to visit at the time, and there were two articles in there written by none other than Barry Winton, funnily enough. If you don't know who Barry Winton is, he's the bloke who's got 30,000 records in his collection. I'm sure you must have seen that video. But anyway, I read up on his articles and recommendations, and eventually started collecting. So here are my top picks. As always, this is all very subjective. This is just my opinion, and I can't put them all in. There's several I wanted to put in, but I can't go through them all. Also, I mentioned Pink Floyd and Deep Purple because they do get so much coverage. I've decided not to put Pink Floyd and Deep Purple albums in here because I think if you're watching this, most of you will know what the albums sound like. The last thing you want is me pulling out a copy of that album with the prism on and going, "Ooh, this is a good one." We all know what that sounds like. So this is going to be dedicated to the more obscure releases. So, and also this is in no specific order. This isn't a ranking video. So start off 1971 album by Roy Harper. He's very, very prolific artist. He's I think he's still recording to this day, but he released loads on Harvest actually. I think he probably rivals Pink Floyd in terms of how many albums he actually released on Harvest. It must be sort of between 8 and 10. But this particular album is Stormcock. It is truly amazing. It's a folk album, but there's just elements of blues, psychedelia, real kind of mystic arrangements, sweeping strings. There's strings by David Bedford. It's only 4 tracks, it's 4 lengthy tracks, but his guitar playing on this kind of just chimes and intertwines, and he's got unusual sort of chord settings, if that's the right word. Sorry, I'm not a guitar player. Chords that he's made up, and the tracks are absolutely amazing. There's several others on Harvest he did to rival this. He did Valentine, HQ, Life Mask, which are all very, very good, but this is his absolute best, in my humble opinion. Wonderful stuff. Okay, next up we've got debut self-titled by Spontaneous Combustion from 1972. This was a young power trio, kind of prog rock, just guitar, bass and drums, but with a little bit of synthesizer as well. This one was actually produced by Greg Lake of ELP fame. I believe they were kind of local to where he lived and supported ELP on their tours at the time. So he picked them up, got them a deal, and produced this record. And it actually is. It's a real high fidelity record. This it's great playing, considering how young they are. I mean, I think they were like 17 or 18 at the time. It's wonderful. If you like your prog rock, yeah, get it. Definitely get it. Second album called Triad is also great. It's just a little notch below this one, I feel, and a little bit more kind of, bit more of a commercial sound. But this is absolutely wonderful. And that is from 1972. Okay, this is a firm favourite. This one is Horizons by Greatest Show on Earth from 1970. Oh, I've loved this band for years, ever since I first got this album. It's a little bit tatty, this. I think it is a bit in need of an upgrade, but it is still very playable. Greatest Show on Earth are an 8-piece band, jazz rock, horn rock. There were so many of them around that time. They've got a saxophonist, 2 saxophonists and a trumpet player, as well as the kind of drums, vocalist, organ, bassist, what have you. Really fantastic songs. It's just a wonderful album. It's just a shame they were so short-lived. The second album by them, which is called The Going's Easy, which I have talked about before, is a heavier record and equally as good, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that debate now. But this is absolutely superb throughout. If you like your kind of brass rock, this is essential. And it's a scarce record, but it's not terribly rare. You know, it is a little bit on the pricey side, but it's not mega bucks. And this one has got, I think you'll find, you open it out, and that has got one of the greatest Hypnosis covers ever. That is absolutely wonderful. And even the inner gatefold, you've got this photo montage that Hypnosis did. It's funny, Hypnosis seemed to crop up on a lot of these albums in the early 70s. I'm guessing it's before they got very, very expensive, when, you know, they were doing the kind of Pink Floyd covers, Dark Side of the Moon and onwards, and all the others. So there's lots of great covers to see around this time. Got another Hypnosis cover here. Oh, this is fantastic. Right. This is debut, self-titled by 9 Days Wonder. So, marginal inclusion here. They were kind of leased out to Harvest Records. They were actually signed to a German label called Bellefon, or a subsidiary called Balaseus. I think I'm right in saying that. Is that how you pronounce it, Balaseus? But for whatever reason, in the UK, their debut album appeared on Harvest. A little bit unusual. It's a bit like the album by Birth Control that you've seen on Charisma Records. It just sometimes these European bands got licensed out in the UK to, you know, these labels. This is fantastic. I suppose you can label it as krautrock. The band were German based, but I believe all the members came from varying countries. I think there's actually a couple of English guys in the band, but they were German based, so it is really a krautrock record. It's quite demented actually at times. It's funny. There's bits on here that are actually quite unsettling. Really, some very weird moments. There's a section on the first track called Morning Spirit, and it's just weird. It's borderline uncomfortable to listen to, but the whole record is absolutely sublime, and it sounds great. It's a really, really loud cut. It's, as soon as you put it on, the music bursts in, and it is just so in your face. It's a masterpiece. It was, honestly, this one was love at first listen. And not an easy one to find, to be honest with you, these UK pressings. They're not easy to find. The original German pressings actually came with a foam sleeve. It's like green foam. I've only ever seen one once. I didn't buy it because I already had this. But yeah, that was something unusual. But yeah, another strange hypnosis cover there. And it just comes highly recommended. 9 Days Wonder. If you can get it or hear it, please do. Right. I did say no Pink Floyd, didn't I? However, I can't not feature The Mad Cat Laughs by Syd Barrett from 1970. Or was it 69? When was it? I think recorded in 69 and released it in 1970. It was a very, very long recording process anyway. It probably took most of 1969 to get him together to record it. So what can you say about Syd Barrett that hasn't already been said? It tortured genius. I mean, what can you say? It's a shame, really, what happened to him. You know, trappings of success, too many drugs, etc., etc. His history has been talked and written about for years, so many times. And I mean, it is a kind of a bit of an uncomfortable listen in a way, because it just captures kind of what was going on with him at the time. But fortunately, they managed to cobble together this just great album. It's actually a difficult one to describe, really. I mean, it's certainly more acoustic based than Piper at the Gates of Dawn and all the kind of early Floyd stuff. But yeah, it's just wonderful. It's singer-songwriter at its maddest, you know, the Mad Cat Laughs. What more can you say about it? It is just wonderful. I'm sure most of you know it anyway. I had to include it in this list. Okay, right, this is probably the scarcest one in the vid. Right, this one's by Panama Limited, second album. It's called Indian Summer. So, their first album, they were called Panama Limited Jug Band, and to be fair, it's probably one of the weakest releases on Harvest. It's kind of traditional jug band arrangements, it's all traditional covers. But on their second album, which was recorded not long afterwards, they changed their lineup slightly and come out with this beautiful, folky, bluesy, kind of Beefheart influenced album. It's absolutely stunning. If you can imagine a cross between Captain Beefheart Unplugged and maybe the better moments of Fairport Convention, only and a lot darker, this is what you've got here. Absolutely brilliant. Another Hypnosis cover. They were everywhere on Harvest. There we go. And there's the band. So if you can pick it up, it is a bit pricey now. I paid a lot less for it than what it goes for now. That was actually bought off Barry Winton, funnily enough. Yeah, yeah. After I actually met him for the first time many years ago, and yeah, he didn't charge me an awful lot, but it has been reissued. So yeah, what can I say? Highly recommended. The title track in particular, Indian Summer, is extremely good. Right. Self-titled, third album by Edgar Broughton Band, also known as the Meat Cover. Hypnosis again, yet again. Look at this cover. I mean, if you can make this out, among the kind of meat carcasses hanging up, there's a bloke just hanging there. And to think they had to go into an abattoir, hang a bloke by his ankles, strip him and photograph it. That's the early 70s for you. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Edgar Broughton Band are fantastic. They're almost like pre-punk. They're one of the pre-punk bands, kind of like the more anarchic side of psychedelia and prog. Very, very good indeed. First two albums by them are very, very raw. This one, they pulled out all the stops on the production and they actually added things like orchestrations, Mike Oldfield on mandolin, although he wasn't that famous at that stage. And yeah, it was a much bigger production without kind of losing their original bluesy, you know, rootsy kind of sound. It is absolutely stunning, this record. It's the best one on the Harvest roster, I think. A lot of people would disagree, but I absolutely love it, and it's not difficult to come by. It's sold relatively well, I think, and it's not that expensive. Like 9 Days Wonder, this was love on first listen. I remember putting it on and being blown away on the first listen, and I've loved it ever since. Beautiful stuff. Right, we have a debut album by Kevin Ayers. This is Joy of a Toy. This one was released in 1970. My favourite buy is, when it comes to artists and bands who have got a fairly kind of prolific output, I never really champion the debut records as their best, but this is an absolute exception. This is a beautiful record. He's kind of been noted to have been influenced by Syd Barrett. I know when he was in Soft Machine in the late 60s, he would have toured with the early Pink Floyd, and certainly that Barrett influence would have come through here, although, you know, certainly he sounds a little bit more together than Barrett did, bless him. But yeah, beautifully produced, strings all over it, a lot members of his old band, the Soft Machine, backing him. It's a real kind of psychedelic, whimsical, kind of real English sound to it. It's you know, quite weird, some of it, but very, very listenable. I do like Kevin Ayers. He's done some great albums, but this one is the pick of the bunch. Really is absolutely great. Right, okay, we've got Barkley James Harvest, 1971. This is Barkley James Harvest and Other Short Stories. They've been going years, Barkley James Harvest, but I've said it before, I only really like the first 4 albums. When they switched to Polydor Records, they became a little bit too soft and gentle for my liking, although they're alright. But the albums on Harvest are just that little bit edgier. They're a little bit heavier, a little bit edgier, but they're still a kind of soft rock band with great harmonies. For years and years, I preferred the album before this, which was called Once Again, which is a tremendously good album. But I got an upgrade copy of this recently. It was gifted to me, I have mentioned before. You know who you are if you're watching, who gifted this to me. And this is absolutely tremendously good. There's some heavy moments on there, lush orchestrations, gorgeous harmonies, and it is just a great collection of songs. It is the lighter side of prog rock. There's not too many sort of, you know, extended arrangements or anything like that. And it is a fantastic sounding record and really easy to find. Original copies, I mean, I have seen them around for as little as £5. £10 is probably more typical. But yeah, it's a great album. Oh, this one is a high point. More Hypnosis covers. I've mentioned this one before. This is the one and only self-titled album by Quatermass from 1970. This, I mean, you hear people say, yeah, this is a killer record. This is a killer record. I can't begin to describe how good this is. Great prog rock. This is just keyboard, bass and drums, which at the time was quite unusual. I think they may have even sort of predated Emerson, Lake and Palmer, although we had the Nice and Egg around for a while, but it was still a very unusual thing. And yeah, unbelievably good musicianship. It's kind of, you know, it's heavy on the organ, you know, sounding a little bit like John Lord from Deep Purple. The organ kind of, you know, has a fuzz to it often, which kind of supplements the guitar sound. Wonderful songs, wonderful arrangements, a few kind of string backings, and at times they get funky as well. You've got the bass player John Gustafson, who later did Love as a Drug by Roxy Music, so clearly he is a funky fellow. And you've got this absolutely awesome Hypnosis sleeve, which is gotta be it's got to be one of the best. I love the hypnosis sleeves from this era. I think they really were at their best when, you know, this is back when they sort of didn't have as much money as the mid-70s. Awesome stuff. Little bit pricey. This is actually a German original. I'd like a UK original. I'm just waiting for one to turn up at the right price, but German copies and other European copies, US copies, are much, much cheaper, and they also reissued it in the UK in the mid-70s with a different sleeve. I cannot recommend this one enough. Quatermass, it's absolutely brilliant. What a shame they never made it. Who knows what they would have become. Right, and the final one. I think this was released the same time as Quatermass actually. I think the catalogue number is the next one along. Nerdy kind of fact for you. This one is Parachute by the Pretty Things. You guessed it, another hypnosis sleeve. I don't say this is the best one they've ever done. It's a weird one. Although the band are looking on fine form. So the Pretty Things, by this time, 1970, had been around for a few years. They started as a kind of more of an R&B, bluesy kind of band. They had a couple of top 10 singles, and in 1968 or possibly 69, certainly around that time, they released the absolute groundbreaking psych album SF Sorrow, which is, I mean, if you know it, you know. Absolutely one of the best psychedelic albums of the era. But they followed it up with equally as good this record, Parachute. This one is more bluesy, more, say, slightly more rocky, less psychedelic, heavier riff based. And if truth be told, with SF Sorrow and this, I think the Pretty Things kind of peaked at this period. They really did. They kind of, you know, they started well, did those two albums, and then they probably dipped down a little bit. That's my humble opinion, but I'm sure many people will agree with me. But this record is absolutely beautiful. If you like your heavy rock, your blues rock, your prog rock, this is one to get. Little bit on the pricey side, but not too bad. Copies do turn up. It was reissued in the mid-70s as a double album with SF Sorrow on Harvest as well. So if you can't afford the originals on those, that is the one to get. Right, guys. What can I say? That's it. As I said before, this is completely subjective. This is just my opinion. Do chime in the comments if you feel I've missed any out. Or, you know, you want to sort of, you know, comment on what your favourites are, blah, blah, blah. Always great to hear from you. Very, very good. As a whole, I have to say, Harvest is just so consistent. I'm going to be controversial and say, I mean, as much as I love Vertigo, that gets all the accolade and credit, I prefer Harvest overall. I really do. In a battle, I think Harvest wins. And while the albums are, a lot of the albums are, you know, a few of them are expensive and they are desirable and collectible, they just don't seem to go for quite as much as the Swirl Vertigo, but the quality is there. So there we go. Right, there we are. That's it. That's my top picks. So yeah, it'd be lovely, as I've said before, please give me a comment. I always like to hear from you. And so until the next time, thanks for watching. Take care.